Hello and welcome to the results video for Inversion, a Nolimits 2 contest I ran during the lead up to Christmas last year. If you want a bit more information on the contest itself, you can watch the announcement video by clicking the card in the top right or the link in the video description. We received a staggering 33 entries, eclipsing the turnout of the last major contest I held by 11. It's been a long undertaking going through them all, but just over a month later we finally have the rankings completed. Joel, one of my co-judges, will be joining me as we look over the top 10, but just before that we want to go over an honourable mention that was picked by each judge.
The first honourable mention from Sukkulents is Crucible by Cat of the Potatoes.
The second honourable mention from Bug Monster 1 is Shot Rod by K-Dub.
The third honourable mention from myself is Torkscrew by INVERS10N.
And finally, the final honourable mention from me is Punisher by Tho124. And now into the top 10.
In 10th place we have Skate 8 by L24 with 132.5 points.
This was a very interesting entry to get. I had a few grievances with the operational setup of this thing. I think it should have been running 3 trains and not 2. But that was pretty much the only major thing that I had against it. It's a really, really intense and fun layout, and that figure 8 is excellent looking from the pathways and stuff.
I mean, immediately as you enter the park you just see these huge, like, towering structures. There's not only the figure 8, but there's also the vertical lift hill and that spike thing that's kind of... It sits in the middle of that big loop by the entrance, so you've got this really cool kind of sight line right as you come in. It's all very well put together.
I really like the interlocking element that's out over near the lake edge as well, with the, well, almost a demonic knot interlocks with the banana roll.
Oh, that is really cool, yeah, that's a really cool element.
But yeah, literally, it was just operational stuff that really stopped this one from really going any further. There were a few minor track mistakes as well. While the figure 8 is a great element, I think the support structure around it is a bit uggo, unfortunately.
Yeah, it took me when I initially opened the park, I didn't realise there was a figure 8 in there, because there's just like this huge like column around it. But once you know it's a figure 8, it's like, oh yeah, definitely. But I do wonder if there was a more elegant way that you could have supported that would have made the 8 actually stand out a lot more. And I mean, I don't want that to like diminish how impressive it is to actually make a figure 8 loop in a layout, and this is the perfect contest to actually do a figure 8 loop as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Also, the little free fall before the swing launch as well was a nice touch. Gives it a bit more of a dynamic feel to it rather than just being a regular old swing launch.
Yeah, definitely.
Next up, in 9th place we have Splinter by Crystallic with 133 points. So, it's a wooden coaster in a 10 inversion contest, which was something that I kind of secretly hoped somebody would do, but I wasn't sure if anybody was going to do it or had the balls to do it, and here we are. And it's managed to sneak its way into the top lists as well. Yeah,
I mean, it's just an impressive in itself being able to do 10 inversions in a wooden coaster, but it's also like quite a good layout as well.
Yeah, it's got a lot
this
of
looks
really...
like it looks like something it looks almost like something Gravity Group would maybe not build, but at least design.
Yeah, it seems like the kind of thing they'd have on the table at IAPA or something as like a concept,
yes.
or even
exactly.
GCI as like a Titan track layout, which is a point we'll get back to in a minute. But no, it looks incredible. The second you enter the park, you've got the 2 big drops, and you've got the first dueling inversions, which, while some of the judges were a bit unsure about the metal truss structure going over the wooden track, I personally think it looks really good, and it opens up the view to it a lot better than some of the other parts of the layout.
Yeah. I mean, that opens up the view. There is the kind of inherent problem with this being a wooden coaster, which is that the structure's just so dense that you don't get much of an idea of the spectacle, and it ends up kind of dividing the park in a way, and just creating this big wall.
There are definitely a few things on here that I think were also a bit too much. Like there's a cutback over the pathway, or that stall is definitely way too quick. I'm not sure how comfortable that would be.
This thing would end up being like Mind Blower within a few years in real life. Like you do have to think about the realism of these things, because it's one of the judging categories for this contest. And you know, this is the kind of ride that would just be an absolute nightmare. And unless the park were retracking it every year like the Voyage, this thing would be just like unbearable within like 2 years of being open, probably.
Yeah, I do reckon if they'd gone with a Titan track design, it might have done a little bit better in that category. I mean, then again, Titan track still wasn't really proven, but I think it would have definitely lasted a lot longer than the wooden track and would have held up a little bit better. Although it must be said, it's nice to see the PTC i360s being used on something.
Yeah. But I mean, it's just generally an amazing achievement to actually manage to do this with a wooden coaster and fit it in the space provided as well, because it's not a huge space. And for a wooden coaster, which you know does take up a bit more space inherently just by it being so beefy, and still be able to fit all these inversions in, it's very good.
Last thing to quickly tack on is we also love the old school signboards that are above the track, where there's one at the station.
Oh yes, those are really nice. Yeah, really nice little touches. In 8th place, we have Ravage by Sad Fuzzball with 134 points.
So Amaura is one of the coaster styles that I wanted to see in this contest, and I did kind of allude to that I wanted one. I'm very glad that somebody has done it, and done it so insanely well.
Yeah, it captures that Maura feel really well. You know, the supports and the profiling. I love that they've used the thick spine in places where it would obviously have a lot more stress on it, or where it has less support structure. Stuff like that. All those little attentions to detail are all really nice.
Yeah, it's good that this sort of has two separate like main focal points as well, because you have the lift and first inversion, and then you also have the Norwegian loop and the mid-course section.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I don't. It's rare that I ever see anyone do Maura's design so bang on, like true to life. It's very, very, very good, and it doesn't feel as meandery as something, say, Rip Ride Rocket as well. You know, if they weren't going for the capacity they wanted on that thing, I could imagine it looking more something like this instead of having the millions of lump sections everywhere.
It's really good. I think it's safe to say if this was a real coaster, it would be the best Maura, probably.
Most likely, yeah. Although there were a couple minor issues, the pacing did get a bit interesting after the brake run. It didn't feel slow by any means, but it did feel like it slowed down a little bit too much near the end. And there was one small clearance failure on this, unfortunately, which did keep it back by 2 points, which did actually keep it from being in 7th, unfortunately. But honestly, regardless of that, I'm just impressed that somebody's been able to do such a true-to-life Maura in this footprint and, you know, actually get away with pulling it off perfectly. I mean, also, one of my favourite parts about this is the support structure on the turnaround just after that's going over the drop of the coaster. Like that is just so like Maura's in the best way possible.
It's really nice, yeah. It's also really nice to just walk around. If you go with a lot of these coasters, what I've been doing is going to the back of the park and standing either in the picnic area or where the shot tower is and looking at the viewpoints by the lake. And this absolutely like holds up when you stand over there as well. It's still so impressive to look at, and so huge and just fun to watch from like loads of different places in the park.
Yeah, Mauras in particular have a good sense of like dynamic movement to them. It's also got a rolling station as well, so it does throw trains out quite frequently. You know, you'll never have a time where there's no train running around the layout unless there's like a stoppage in the station. Like there'll always be something to watch no matter where you're looking. And in 7th place we have Badeku by Intim305 with 135.5 points.
It's really impressive how compact this one is. Like they actually didn't use the whole allotted space and still, you know, managed to pack in a really good layout.
Yeah, obviously using the whole template space wasn't a requirement, unlike some other contests I've run. I was kind of interested to see whether somebody would try and keep it in one section or another. There is another entry that doesn't use the area where the pit is at all, which unfortunately did make the top 10. Yeah, with this in particular, everything feels very densely compact, especially for how little height it has and how little momentum it has. It still keeps running through. I think this is the third smallest entry we got in the contest, something along those lines. I mean, it doesn't dominate the whole skyline as such, but you can very much feel its presence no matter where you are in the pathway, with obviously the exception of over where the shot tower is. It does feel a little bit distant. Yeah, there's definitely a few things that did flag up a little bit on this, especially with the layout. It's very, very intense and very snappy. Skate 8 also had similar, but on this one in particular, because obviously it's all very small, punchy transitions, and there's a lot of them back to back constantly. I do wonder if it would be a bit too much for a lot of riders. I mean, we've both been on Maverick as of last year, and that is obviously a very intense and whippy ride, and this is tenfold more so. So I do honestly wonder how comfortable it would be in the long run.
I think that's more so to say it would, the general public would come here, they'd ride it once or twice and be like, well, that's enough. And then you get the occasional hardcore enthusiast that would be like marathoning this thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very intense, but a really cool and compact layout. Loads of really cool little interlocking moments. I really love the spike of the swing launch going through the incline loop. That's like awesome. That's a really cool little piece that I almost missed actually.
There's a lot of
so dense, yeah.
There's a lot of subtle things here. I do wish that there was a bit of train interaction there, but obviously with the block setup that wouldn't be possible. There is also one of my favourite parts is the roll that goes over the top of the station. However, it was very much on the fine line for acceptable for clearance. I think you'd have to have a sign up in the station saying no one's allowed to jump while they're waiting to board.
As you know, if you tell people not to do something, they will of course follow it to the letter. Yep. Oh, I forgot. They did actually use the space by the lake. They've put Woosball there. Good old Woosball. It's just hanging out in the corner. Okay, in 6th place we have Wicked by Luco with 139 points.
Another style that I really wanted to see, which was a spinning coaster, and this was a very late start, I think. 'Cause I think he'd done like 3 different layouts before this. I don't know if you saw any of them, but he tried doing a X-Car type thing with his custom style manufacturer and ended up unfortunately canning that. And very late in, when I mentioned the spinning coaster would be interesting to see, I think he started working on this.
Cool. This does one of the things that quite a few entries have done that I really like, where they've used the pit, but then they've filled in the parts they haven't used and used it to create a kind of plaza with interactions going over little bridges and around tunnels and stuff. There's a couple more entries further up that have also done this. It's a really nice way of having a bit of extra kind of interactiveness with the path, and gives it a few extra points for spectacle. It's always cool when the lift hill starts underground and sort of rises up out of a pit. Makes it seem much more kind of intimidating from off-ride.
Especially when it's right next to the queue line as well.
Yes, yeah.
It's also just a very satisfying ride to look at. Like, even when there's not a train running around, it's very geometric and very curvy.
Yeah, it looks like it's just a very kind of squiggly and just pleasing, flowy ride to watch. And the fact that it's a spinning coaster as well adds that much more of a fun factor to watching it off-ride.
Absolutely, give a lot of re-rideability as well. And something that I haven't really mentioned for the other entries so far is that, yes, these roller coasters will have 10 inversions. We're starting to get to a point where if you weren't told that, you probably wouldn't know. It doesn't feel gimmicky. And this is probably one of the ones that doesn't feel too gimmicky with it either. Like, it just flows and just goes. Like, none of the inversions feel forced into the layout by any means. Although I will say, I think the spinning, if this was a real design, they definitely need a dampener on it, because there are points where it goes very, very fast and would throw you out the seat quite a lot.
Yeah.
The other thing that confused me a little bit about this ride as well was the general station setup they have. They really had to fit that storage tracking quite late on into the process, I believe. So it has an offload station, which is also a transfer track, but the stairs to get off the station are at the station. While this didn't necessarily affect the points, it definitely made me raise my eyebrow when I was looking at it and wondering how it was meant to actually work. Honestly, I think this could work with just one station without the offload platform, if I'm perfectly honest, so I think there's a lot of complexity added for not much gain, in my opinion. We're halfway now. In 5th place, we have Euphorion by Zampano with 139.5 points.
This definitely makes a statement from off-ride.
Yeah.
I always like an interesting colour scheme. And I do really like the kind of yellow and orange to red kind of gradients that they have going on in the track here. It's very, very nice to look at from off-ride. Personally, I don't mind the pink supports, but the supports are very dense in a lot of places, and it does just kind of slightly push the line from being, bright and fun to just being a little bit ugly. But like I say, it's right on the edge, and it's still very cool to look at off-ride. Another thing I'm a huge fan of is the entrance to this ride. You've got the little kind of archway things, and the path interacts with the first inversion as you can imagine on a busy day standing in the queue for this thing and watching the trains dispatch with all the guests on the ride going through the first inversion, and you have that kind of interactive moment. I really like a little interaction like that.
Yeah, also when they shoot out the other side as well, going up the launch tower, which would be a hell of an exhilaration. And also the second and third inversion. No, it's second. No, it's fourth and fifth actually. No, third and fourth inversion. Oh, there's too many on this. The one where it flicks you out towards the entrance is amazing as a sightline when you walk into the park. Like that will grab your attention. And you do have a slight bit of train interaction as well, where there's another outer bank below it. One train goes through that one, and then the other train goes through that one. There's a similar interaction on the drop as well, where the train will go through the cutback next to the drop as well, which is a very nice touch. I think one of my other favourite bits about this ride is the absolutely humongous stall which goes over the pathway. Or it would probably feel like you're being held upside down forever.
Yeah, I do like a good stall. I guess one of the only things is when you've got this path that goes underneath the layout, one of the things that that people should definitely be thinking about a little bit here in terms of the realism is having things like loose article nets, or if you're not going to have that, have lockers in the queue, because that is something where there would be a risk of, keys, phones, coins falling out of people's pockets and landing on the guests on the path. And especially on a stall as well. I mean, that's like the element to drop items on people's heads.
There were a few other operational gripes as well as the nettings. There was the brake run, which is very short, and I do worry about how that would handle if it was a hot day. I would expect it would flag up a lot of overspeeds. But also there was no catwalk by the launch track either, so if there was an evacuation you wouldn't be able to exit. I'd definitely recommend people to think about where the train could potentially stop, where people might potentially need to get off the train, and where a catwalk is going to be required for that.
In 4th place, just missing out on the top 3, we have Wyvern by Waldo La with 145.5 points.
So this is just what Hyperion should have been, right?
Yeah. This is one of the ones that, once we got all the entries in, this is one of the ones that we knew was going to do really well. And it was kind of one of our initial favourites from the beginning. So, it's really cool to see that it's actually scored really well as well amongst all the judges. It's very, very impressive.
Yeah, this ride definitely isn't perfect. There's quite a few minor errors here and there, especially supporting wise, but because of how insanely well did in every other aspect, it's what's kept it afloat, despite any small issues that have cropped up with, especially support flanges. That was the big one for this that probably cost it a good few points and could have potentially been the deciding factor between that and top 3.
Yeah, but I mean, aside from that, those are fairly minor things, and this is still just really cool. It's great to see a hypercoaster in this. I mean, were there any other hypercoasters? I haven't actually been able to see what's over 200 feet and what isn't.
Well, 200 feet was actually the limit, so
right.
I believe this does have a 200-foot drop because it utilises the slope down by the lake to its advantage.
Ah, I see. Yes, the drop is over 200 feet.
Yeah.
Please don't judge me for not knowing the rules of the contest that I'm judging. My God. No, this is very cool.
Everywhere you are in this park, everywhere, no matter where you're looking, there's always a tall element, and it obviously is quite dominant on the skyline, but it's not just a complete monolith blocking the view to anything else.
Yeah, and this is again, you go and stand in that picnic area, or go stand by the shot tower, and you can, like, the view you get of that massive lift hill and that drop, it almost looks like it's leaning over the lake and is about to fall in. It's really cool.
Yeah, the front row of this, where you just have the water in front of you as you're about to plunge vertically down and then twist, is such an excellent viewpoint. Also an interesting one is the stall near the end of the ride that serves as one of the main trims for the ride to slow it down for the brake run, which
yes,
I think is a pretty good stroke of genius, to be honest. I mean, it definitely is better than having a flat section with trims on it.
It's a nice way of just pushing it up to that 10 inversion limit, whilst kind of also functioning to slow the ride down. It's a very efficient use of the space provided.
Absolutely. Again, quite a few of these have had this set, and the brake run does been a tiny bit too short, but I think with this one in particular, I can wave it away a lot more because of having most of the momentum taken out by that large trim.
This ride actually has lockers, and they've put signs up at the start that say you must use these lockers before you go on the ride, which is great because, yeah, this thing also does have inversions that go... actually, they're not quite inversions, but it does have elements where it goes over that path between the two sides of the park, so they're the much more elegant option because it means the ride you can have less kind of stuff attached to the ride and nets everywhere. You don't need to have that if you've got lockers. That's why it helps things like Fly Fantasyland look so clean. So yeah, I like that as an extra touch. It's just those little attentions to detail, and when people put stuff in like that, you can tell that they've really thought about what this would be like if it existed in real life and how it would practically have to work.
Alrighty, so our first prize winner in third place is Bazooka by 360 Ball with 146.5 points. Literally 1 point in it between this and the previous entry. It was damn close, and they did do a bit of swapping around until we finally settled on the scores.
Yeah, it took a lot of deliberation whether it was going to be this or Wyvern in 3. So yeah, but I think ultimately this one deserves to take it just by that extra tiny margin, because this thing is just clean. Like, that's the best word I could use to describe it, really. It just feels so efficiently built.
Yeah, like there's not like all the support structures are super well designed. It's hard to describe how without going into nerdy detail, but just looking at it, you can tell, yes, this works. This is nice and simple. There's not loads of pipes everywhere. All the views are very clean. Like you can look through parts of the ride where it looks like some elements are floating, especially the big airtime hill after the inverted stall launch, which does just look like it's suspended, hanging by nothing from most of the angles around the park.
Yeah, it's really cool. Yeah, I think supports are obviously they were one of the categories, and I think one of the things you've got to look for in supports is not only that it's structurally sound, but also that they've been built efficiently and aren't going to just be wasting unnecessary amounts of steel. And I think this does a really good job of just having exactly what it needs to hold it all up, and it means that you can really see the layout. you know, without any kind of anything blocking the sightline. And like I say, yeah, the supports kind of, you almost kind of look past them, which makes some of those elements look like they're floating in the air.
Yeah, this was an interesting one to go through for me, because at first I didn't hate it, I did really love it, but it didn't really have that kick to me. It took a while for me to sort of get it. I'm very mixed on Intamin's new gen stuff. I don't think any of it's bad by any means, but I do feel like a lot of it misses the bite of like the 2000s and 2010, like early 2010s era Intamin stuff. So it's not really anything on the entry, to be honest. Once I sort of sat there and thought about it, and you know, opened it, I had it open, walking around. I could just see this being built. It's so perfect. I mean, again, this is another ride where if you didn't tell me this was 10 inversions, I wouldn't believe you, because of the amount of variety it has in its layout, and it doesn't feel like a gimmicky, forced thing.
I was definitely exactly the same, where I didn't rate this highly at first, and it was one of the other judges, Kelton, who looked at this and was like, this thing's amazing, what are you guys doing, you're sleeping on this. And actually, yeah, I agree, the more I look at this, the more I realise how well put together this thing is.
Yeah, I think my favourite part of it is definitely the second launch with the inverted stall and the rolls. That would be excellent sensation.
Oh yeah, it's awesome. And I love the little sound effects they've added in as well.
Yeah, I think all of the top three, I think, feel like, you know, real pitch designs. Like, if you told me this was shown at IAAPA as like a concept by Intamin, I'd fully believe you.
The second prize winner in second place is Electron by ML Designs with 147 points. So yeah, that's 0.5 over Bazooka. So very, very close. But yeah, I love this one. I was very kind of hands-off with the early stages of the contest, and as a result, I hadn't seen a lot of the entries prior to opening them. So this is one that I'd seen almost nothing of until I opened it on my own computer, and I was really impressed almost straight away. This was the first one that I gave a really high score to while I was judging it. Yeah, this is fantastic.
It's a very interesting, not really these days, because Premier are kind of making a comeback in the US, but having a non-standard ride type like a Premier launch coaster, especially when a lot of people would automatically think of like Intamins or Gerstlau's for this sort of thing. But it looks the part fully.
Yeah. Well, like I say, when I look at this, I can see West Coast Racers, I can see like Alpenfury in this. It really has that Premier feel to it. Yeah, it's great, and it has that kind of twisty, dense look that you'd kind of expect when you think of a 10 inversion coaster, which yeah, it does make it just an absolute spectacle when you're walking around.
I personally think this is the most realistic entry we've seen, with Bazooka again being very, very close. But there is nothing on this that I would change at all. It's just yeah, I mean, the entrance with the sightline of the banana roll, which is near the end of the layout, which is surprising actually. You'd expect it to be one of the first few major elements, but the way it paces and having the interlocking rolls after the first drop as well, which you go one way through one roll and back around it the other way, and it just goes. It's a lot of forward momentum, and you could probably feel the sense of speed on this a lot, while still not being, too overly intense.
There's a few that just, as I fly around this thing, I have this thing open in Nolimits right now just to remind myself of some of the things that I want to talk about with this ride. I really like how the brake run starts like halfway through an inversion, so it's a really compact way of slowing it down to a stop. And I also love that because that's something that Premiers do in real life, like, oh my god, I've forgotten his name. Full Throttle has that brake run halfway down the hill. So, you can look at that and go, oh yeah, no, Premiers do that, so this is a completely, plausible thing that you could see being built, so that adds to that realism thing. There's also the fact that the two, all of the sort of pits by the entrance where the coaster goes below the ground level, all of those pits have got staircases built in them, so if the coaster does stall down there, you can get the guests out. It's got the little op panels by the launch. The catwalks that go to the ground have also got their own paths that lead to little gates back to the main plazas and everything. It's even got an on-ride photo point and little screens to look at your photos after the ride. There's so many cool little touches on this that really help sell the fact that this could be a real coaster.
Yeah, one of my other favourite things it does is how much it contours down the side of the hill, drops towards the lake, where it goes through one of its other major elements, where it sticks very close to the ground. I think that is a really good use of that hilly terrain, which is something that I did hope that a lot of people would do, is have elements sort of hug close to it and then leap over the pathway back into the main section of the area.
Yeah, and when you have those low to the ground sections, it means that the tall, really spectacular elements can stand out a lot more as well. So especially when you go towards the back of the park, you know, yes, there is a big, dense, twisty part which looks great, but there's also parts where there's just those big standalone elements that you can just watch without anything else kind of getting in their way. So there's a real kind of nice balance of different viewpoints around here.
Yeah, definitely a well-deserved second place. And finally, the winner of Inversion and the recipient of the final prize, first place goes to 20er by Darkstar with 155.5 points, which is insane when you consider that the maximum score you could have gotten in this contest was 160. I mean, what can I say that anyone else hasn't already said about this? I feel like everyone knew this was coming with this being first place. Like, oh my god, how? For someone who didn't want to enter this contest at first, they really pulled it out of the hat, didn't they?
Yeah, this is just like, I mean, this is just an insane achievement to have actually managed to create this thing, let alone win the contest as well. Like, honestly, I feel like just making this thing is a bigger achievement than winning this contest, to be honest.
Yeah, if there was a category for that, this and Splinter would be the ones for that.
Yes, yeah.
But no, I just, I don't even know where to begin with this thing, because, I mean, where do you begin? You look at it and you could barely make out anything. It's 20 inversions compacted into this space, and it doesn't feel that repetitive despite that. It certainly gets close near the end of the halves with the rolls, but honestly, it is just a way to get it back to the brake run at the end of the day. Like, you know, there's always almost a chance of dueling, even if the train dispatch times vary slightly. So sometimes you get it perfectly dueling over the 00G roll and the corkscrew element. Sometimes you'll get it perfectly dueling through the Batwing and some of the other elements on that end of the ride. You're almost always going to have an interaction on the pretzel loop and demonic knot area. And if you're very lucky, you'll also get them dueling on the rolls near where the queue starts, which I had to wait a significant amount of time to record for the showcase video.
There's just so much to watch. I mean, there's absolutely no way you could actually predict where the train is going to go next. I don't think you'd have to try very hard to actually track one train through this thing. It's just insane to look at.
People don't even understand how the Smiler works. Imagine if you put them in front of this.
Yeah. The other thing is, I mean, it feels crazy to be talking about the queue on a ride this insane, but the queue is actually really good.
Yeah, apparently a lot of expletives were said while they were trying to fit this queue in. A few things had to be changed, as I was made aware of, but it works perfectly, and obviously you have a fantastic view of the ride no matter where you are in the queue. And it isn't unlike the Smiler, which has the issue of it being quite claustrophobic and right underneath the ride, where you feel very trapped at times. This feels very open in opposition to that, while still offering a view of all of the amazing dueling this ride has to offer.
It also does not look like a queue that had to be squeezed in kind of painstakingly. It's got loads of space, it's got little spaces for vending machines, there's bins, there's little screens, there's space for shrubbery. It's quite a nicely designed queue, really. It's just really impressively done. It looks very believable.
I think one of the only things that I remember you saying is, "Where's the roof?" on the
Yeah, I
station.
mean, it would be nice. A roof is a nice to have. I mean, you know, it doesn't have to have one, and plenty of coasters don't. And I'm not going to expect a roof to be fitted into a coaster this insane. It just would have been an extra annoyance in designing something like this.
Yeah, there were a few. Obviously, there were a few minor things that hold it back from like a perfect 160, which would have been like if you got that, I wouldn't even know where to begin. But there were just a few parts where some beams were a bit too long, and they could have done with a few more flanges. And there was also no catwalk along the full launch, which means that it stops at the bottom of the banana roll. Then that's it. Good luck.
I'm sure it'd be fine.
But yeah, that is like, you know, minuscule in comparison to just how impressive this ride is for just existing. I mean, when this was submitted, Tyler said to open it and then just stay watching it, and I did. I literally watched it for like an hour. You just can't take your eyes off of it.
Yeah, no, it's amazing.
And that's a wrap for Inversion. I'm so proud of the amazing rides people made, and I can't thank everyone enough for taking part. The spreadsheet with the judges' comments and full breakdowns will be linked in the description. Also in the description is a download to what you currently see on screen now, a park file with all 33 entries imported into Loopy Lake. Thank you so much for watching, and check out the video showcasing all 33 rides here.